The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited a dead star. Inside, 12 species from across the galaxy sat in their designated seats, each one representing a civilization that had conquered the stars long before humanity learned to make fire. The chamber was cold, built for beings who breathed different air and lived under different suns. At the center of the room stood a single human, looking small and fragile compared to the aliens around him. Daniel Morrison wore a simple black suit with a silver pin on his collar, the symbol of Earth. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face calm as he listened to the council deliver their ultimatum. Around him, the 12 council members whispered to each other in languages that sounded like clicks, hums, and scraping metal. Council Prime Velthian raised one of his forearms, and the chamber fell silent. He was an insectoid creature, tall and covered in dark green chitin that reflected the dim lights of the chamber. His compound eyes showed no emotion as he spoke. His voice translated into human language through the devices embedded in the walls. Ambassador Morrison, the Galactic Council has made its decision. Humanity will surrender immediate control of 3 colony worlds: New Houston, Terra Nova, and Kepler Station. You have 72 hours to evacuate your people and transfer all administrative authority to council oversight. Daniel did not move. He simply nodded once and said, "May I ask why the council requires these specific worlds?" Velthian's mandibles clicked together in what might have been amusement. The resources on these worlds are needed for the greater galactic community. Your species has only been traveling between stars for 50 years. You do not have the experience or the authority to control such valuable territories. To the left of Velthian sat Ambassador Kresh, a massive reptilian creature with scales the color of dried blood. His species, the Draxan Empire, had fought and won wars across 100 systems. Kresh leaned forward, his claws scraping against the metal of his seat. "Human, your people were given a gift when you discovered faster-than-light travel. You stumbled onto technology you barely understand. The Council allowed you to keep your home world and a few minor colonies out of courtesy. Do not mistake our patience for weakness." Daniel turned to face Kresh directly. His voice remained steady and professional. "Ambassador Kresh, those colonies contain over 15 million human civilians. Many of them were born on those worlds. They are not resources to be transferred. They are people." A sound like broken glass filled the chamber as several council members laughed. Ambassador Solara, a bird-like creature with silver feathers and bright yellow eyes, tilted her head to one side. Unlike the others, she did not laugh. Instead, she watched Daniel with an expression that might have been curiosity. "Ambassador Morrison," Velthian continued, "the Council is not requesting your cooperation. We are informing you of our decision. If humanity refuses, we will take those worlds by force. Your fleet consists of 47 military vessels. The Draxan Empire alone commands over 3,000 warships. Do you truly believe you have any choice in this matter?" Daniel took a slow breath. He had known this moment would come eventually. Ever since humanity had made first contact with the Galactic Council, the other species had treated Earth like children playing with toys they did not deserve. The Council had refused to share advanced technology, had blocked human trade agreements, and had slowly pushed humanity into smaller and smaller territories. Now they wanted to take even that away. "I need to consult with my government," Daniel said. "I request 48 hours to bring your ultimatum to Earth and receive official instructions." Kresh slammed one massive fist against his seat. "You request? You are in no position to request anything, human. The Council has spoken. Accept or face the consequences." Daniel met the reptilian's eyes without flinching. "Then I suppose I am facing the consequences. But I still require time to deliver this message to my people. 48 hours is a small thing to ask." Velthian waved one arm dismissively. "Very well. You have your 48 hours. Use them wisely. Ambassador, prepare your people for the inevitable." Quote, the other council members began to talk among themselves, already discussing how they would divide the human colonies. Daniel heard them calculating the value of mining operations, discussing which species would control which orbital facilities, debating the fate of the human civilians who would be left behind. "If I may address the council one final time," Daniel said, his voice cutting through the conversation. Velthian turned back to him. "Speak quickly, human. We have other matters to attend to." Daniel looked at each council member in turn. He saw arrogance in their eyes, certainty that they held all the power. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had seen species rise and fall. To them, humanity was nothing more than another primitive race that needed to be controlled. "I strongly advise you to reconsider this action," Daniel said, his voice quiet but clear. "Humanity does not bluff, and we remember those who declare war upon us. If you choose this path, you should choose it carefully." For a moment, the chamber was silent. Then Kresh began to laugh. A deep rumbling sound that shook the air. The other council members joined him, their various forms of laughter creating a chorus of alien sounds. "Is that a threat, human?" Kresh asked between laughs. "Do you honestly believe your tiny fleet could stand against the might of the council?" "It is not a threat," Daniel replied. "It is a warning. There is a difference." Velthian waved his arms again. "Your warning is noted and dismissed. You have 48 hours, Ambassador Morrison. I suggest you spend that time preparing your people for displacement, rather than making empty threats. This council has destroyed civilizations far older and more powerful than yours. Your species is barely out of its cradle. Do not pretend you have any power here." Daniel gave a slight bow, the kind of formal gesture humans used to show respect they did not feel. "Then I will return to Earth and deliver your message. I hope, for all our sakes, that wisdom will prevail." He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Behind him, the council members had already returned to their discussions, dividing up human territory like merchants at a market. Only Solara continued to watch him leave, her yellow eyes thoughtful. As Daniel stepped into the airlock that led to his ship, he heard Kresh's voice one final time, loud and mocking. "Run home to your primitive world, human. Tell them the age of your expansion is over. The council has spoken." Thus dade, for the reader to see. Thus dade. Run home to your primitive world. The airlock sealed behind Daniel, cutting off the sound of alien laughter. He walked through the connecting tunnel to his small diplomatic vessel, a ship barely large enough for a crew of 5. His pilot, a young woman named Helen Carter, looked up as he entered. "How did it go, Ambassador?" she asked. Daniel sat down in the co-pilot seat and began strapping himself in. "About as well as we expected. They gave us an ultimatum. We have 48 hours. Helen started the launch sequence, her fingers moving across the controls with practiced ease. "Are we really going to let them take our colonies?" "No," Daniel said quietly. "We are not. But they do not know that yet. They think we are weak, because we are young. They are about to learn a very old human lesson." "What lesson is that, sir?" The ship detached from the council station and began moving away, its engines glowing bright in the darkness. Daniel watched through the viewport as the massive structure grew smaller behind them. "Never start a war unless you are prepared to finish it," he said. "The council has made their choice. Now, they will live with the consequences." Helen activated the faster-than-light drive, and the ship jumped into hyperspace, leaving the council station alone in the dark. Inside the chamber, 12 species celebrated their victory over humanity, confident in their power and certain of their superiority. They had 48 hours to enjoy that confidence. After that, everything would change. The Global Defense Command headquarters sat buried beneath 300 meters of solid rock in the Colorado mountains. Daniel Morrison stepped out of the military transport and was immediately escorted through a series of security checkpoints, each one more heavily guarded than the last. Within an hour of his ship landing, he stood in a conference room surrounded by the most powerful people on Earth. Admiral Lisa Crawford sat at the head of the table, a woman in her late 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too many simulations of human extinction. Next to her sat President Ryan Kaufman, younger than most expected for a world leader. But his calm demeanor had guided Earth through the difficult years since first contact with the Galactic Council. Dr. Karen Phillips stood near a large display screen, her fingers already pulling up data files and strategic assessments. She was a specialist in military history and had spent the last decade studying every war humanity had ever fought, looking for patterns that might help them survive in a hostile galaxy. "Tell us everything," Lisa said as Daniel took his seat. Daniel did not waste time with pleasantries. "The Council wants 3 of our colonies: New Houston, Terra Nova, and Kepler Station. They gave us 72 hours to evacuate and surrender control. When I asked for time to consult with Earth, they granted 48 hours. They were laughing when I left." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his face carefully neutral. "Did you deliver the warning we discussed?" "Yes, Mr. President. I told them that humanity does not bluff, and that we remember those who declare war upon us." They dismissed it completely. Kresh said, "We are barely out of our cradle." Velthian reminded me that they command thousands of warships, while we have less than 50. "They are not wrong about the numbers," Lisa said. "In a straight fight, we would lose. Badly. But we are not going to fight straight," Karen added, her voice quiet but firm. "We never have." Ryan stood and walked to the window that looked out over the command center below. Hundreds of people worked at stations, monitoring communications, tracking ship movements, analyzing data from across human space. They had been preparing for this moment since the day Earth made first contact with an alien species. "How much do they know about us?" Ryan asked. "Very little," Daniel replied. "They know we have 50 years of spaceflight experience. They know our fleet size. They know the locations of our major colonies. What they do not know is what we are capable of when pushed into a corner." Lisa smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then, I think it is time we educated them. Karen, show the ambassador what we have been building." Karen tapped several commands into her tablet, and the main screen lit up with images of ships, weapons, and facilities that officially did not exist. Daniel had seen some of this before, but the full scope still took his breath away. "Over the past 20 years, Karen began, we have been constructing defensive installations across all our territories. Hidden bases inside asteroids. Weapons platforms disguised as mining equipment. Missile batteries buried beneath the surface of every colony world. The Council thinks we have 47 military vessels. The real number is closer to 300. Most of them small and fast. Designed for hit-and-run tactics rather than direct engagement. They also think our weapons are inferior to theirs," Lisa continued. "And in some ways, they are right. We do not have their shield technology or their energy weapons. But we have something they stopped using centuries ago. Kinetic weapons," Daniel said, understanding immediately. "Exactly. Railguns that fire solid slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. Missiles that do not need guidance systems because they carry enough explosive to destroy anything within a kilometer of impact. Mines that drift through space, looking like debris until a ship passes by. The Council has been fighting wars with energy shields and laser weapons for so long that they have forgotten how effective simple violence can be." Ryan turned back to face the group. "But hardware alone will not win this war. We need to make them understand what it means to fight humanity. We need to make them afraid." "I have a proposal for that," Karen said. She pulled up a new file on the screen. "We send them a message. Not a political statement or a threat. We send them our history." For the next hour, Karen outlined her plan. Earth would compile a comprehensive package of human military history, starting from the ancient wars and continuing through every major conflict up to the present day. The package would include casualty figures, duration of wars, tactical analyses, and psychological profiles of human soldiers. "We will send them footage from the trenches of World War I," Karen explained. "We will show them soldiers who fought for years in mud and poison gas, who went over the top knowing they would probably die, and who did it anyway, because that was what their duty required. We will send them data from World War II, a conflict that killed over 70 million people and still ended with humanity stronger than before. We will show them Vietnam, where a technologically superior force was ground down by an enemy that refused to quit. Will they understand the significance? Daniel asked. They will understand the numbers, Karen replied. They will see that humans have fought wars lasting years, sometimes decades. They will see that we have lost millions of soldiers and continued fighting. They will see that we have destroyed our own cities, burned our own lands, and sacrificed entire generations to win our wars. And then we will add one final page. She pulled up a document with a single paragraph of text. We have survived worse than you, fought longer wars than you can imagine, and we do not surrender our own. Declare war carefully. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Ryan nodded. Send it. Send all of it. Give them one last chance to reconsider. 24 hours later, the package arrived at the Galactic Council chamber. Velthian received it first, and he immediately shared it with the other council members. For several hours, the chamber was quiet as the aliens reviewed humanity's bloody history. Kresh was the first to speak. They are savages. Look at this. They killed each other by the millions over territory, resources, ideology. They used weapons that poisoned their own air and water. They are exactly what we thought they were, primitive and violent. But they won those wars, Solara said quietly. All of them, eventually. Even when they were losing, they found a way to survive. Because they were fighting other humans, Velthian replied. They have never faced a truly advanced military force. They have never fought beings with shields and energy weapons and faster-than-light communication. This history proves nothing except that they are dangerous to themselves. Solara's feathers ruffled in agitation. It proves they do not surrender. It proves they are willing to die for what they believe in. It proves they have been fighting wars since before they left their planet. We should reconsider this action. The decision is made, Velthian said firmly. The Draxan fleet is already in position. General Vokath assures me that he can take all 3 colonies within a week. The humans will resist, certainly. But they will fall. And then they will learn their place in the galactic order. Far from the council chambers, aboard the Draxan flagship, General Vokath read through the human historical data with growing contempt. He was a veteran of 30 campaigns, a warrior who had conquered planets and destroyed fleets. The idea that these primitive humans could stand against him was insulting. He called his senior officers together and showed them footage from human wars. They watched soldiers charging across open ground into machine gun fire. They saw cities reduced to rubble. They observed humans fighting hand-to-hand in trenches filled with mud and corpses. This is what we face, Vokath told his officers. A species too stupid to know when they are beaten. They will fight us. Yes. They will make us work for our victory. But they cannot win. We have superior technology, superior numbers, and superior experience. This will be over quickly, his officers agreed. Their confidence, absolute. They began final preparations for the invasion of New Houston. The first target on their list, the Draxan fleet, over 200 ships strong, moved into position at the edge of human space. Back on Earth, Lisa Crawford watched the fleet movements on her displays. She had hoped the Council would reconsider after seeing humanity's history. But she had also known they probably would not. Beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years rarely believed they could be challenged by newcomers. Activate all defensive networks, she ordered. Send the signal to every colony, every outpost, every hidden base. The war has begun. Make them pay for every meter they take. Across human space, lights began to appear in the darkness. Weapons, platforms powered up, ships undocked from secret facilities. Soldiers who had been training for this moment moved into position. And on New Houston, the first human colony the Draxan fleet planned to attack, Commander Nicole Turner stood on the command deck of the orbital defense station and watched the enemy fleet approach. They think this will be easy, she said to her crew. They think we are primitives playing at war. Let us show them what humans do when someone threatens our home. The Draxan fleet jumped into the system, and the war began. General Vokath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Fang, and looked at the planet below with satisfaction. New Houston hung in space like a blue and green jewel, completely unaware of what was about to happen. His tactical displays showed minimal orbital defenses, just a few outdated platforms that would not last 5 minutes against his fleet. "This is almost disappointing," Vokath said to his second-in-command. "The humans did not even try to evacuate. They are either very brave or very foolish." "Probably foolish, General," the officer replied. "Our intelligence shows the colony has a population of 6 million. Most of them are civilians. They cannot seriously expect to resist." Vokath studied the planet for a moment longer. The human warning had made him cautious, but now that he saw their actual defenses, his caution turned to contempt. They had sent all that historical data about their wars, trying to intimidate the Council. But wars against other primitive humans meant nothing when facing a modern military force. "Begin the bombardment," Vokath ordered. "Target their orbital platforms first, then their ground-based communications. We will cut off their ability to coordinate before we land troops." The Draxan weapons powered up, energy gathering in massive cannons designed to crack planetary shields. Vokath watched the targeting displays as his ships locked onto the human platforms. This would be over in hours, maybe less. The first shots fired, and then everything changed. The moment the Draxon weapons discharged, the space around New Houston came alive. What Vokath had thought were asteroids suddenly sprouted weapons. Debris that had floated in orbit for decades cracked open to reveal missile batteries. The surface of the planet's 2 moons lit up with launch flares as hundreds of projectiles leaped into space. "Evasive action!" Vokath shouted. But it was already too late. The first kinetic rounds hit his fleet with devastating force. These were not energy weapons that could be absorbed by shields. These were solid metal slugs traveling at speeds that turned them into relativistic weapons. They punched through Draxan shields like they were not even there, tearing massive holes in ship hulls and venting atmosphere into the void. One of his cruisers took a direct hit to its main reactor. The ship did not explode immediately. Instead, it seemed to fold in on itself as the reactor went critical, creating a brief flash of light that blinded sensors across the fleet. When the light faded, the cruiser was gone. 3,000 Draxan soldiers died in an instant. "How many hidden weapons platforms do they have?" Vokath demanded. His tactical officer stared at the displays in shock. "Sensors are detecting launch sites across 12 asteroids, both moons, and at least 30 locations we previously categorized as debris. General, there are hundreds of them, possibly thousands." Commander Nicole Turner watched from her station as the Draxan fleet scrambled to respond to her carefully prepared trap. She had spent 5 years overseeing the construction of these hidden defenses, working with engineers to disguise weapons platforms as mining equipment, hollowing out asteroids to create missile silos, and training civilian volunteers to operate military hardware. "All batteries, sustained fire," she ordered. "Do not give them time to adapt. I want continuous launches from every platform. Burn through our munitions if we have to. Make them think we have unlimited ammunition." The human strategy was simple. They could not match the Draxan fleet in a prolonged engagement. But they did not need to. They just needed to make the cost of victory unbearable. Across the orbital space around New Houston, magnetic accelerators fired solid projectiles at targets that were still trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. Human missiles, cheap and numerous, swarmed toward Draxan ships in waves. Some were destroyed by point defense systems. Many more got through. Captain Jason Hendricks commanded a small frigate called the Defiant, one of the few human military vessels in the system. His ship was tiny compared to the Draxan cruisers, barely large enough to carry a crew of 20. But it was fast, and right now, speed mattered more than firepower. "Take us in close," Jason ordered his pilot. "Target that cruiser's engine section. We are going to give them something to think about." His crew knew what he was planning. They had trained for this scenario dozens of times. The Defiant accelerated toward a Draxan cruiser that was busy trying to target the hidden platforms. Jason waited until they were almost on top of the enemy ship, then gave the order. "Fire all missiles. Full spread. 30 missiles launched from the Defiant's tubes, each one aimed at the cruiser's vulnerable engine ports. The Draxon ship tried to bring its defensive weapons to bear, but the Defiant was already past it, racing away at full speed. 28 missiles were destroyed by Draxon point defense. 2 got through. The explosions ripped through the cruiser's engine section, and the massive ship began to drift, losing power and maneuvering capability. It was not destroyed, but it was out of the fight. "One down," Jason said. "Find me another target." But before his pilot could respond, a Draxon destroyer locked onto the Defiant. Energy weapons lashed out, catching the small frigate in a devastating barrage. Alarms screamed as the ship's hull began to fail. Jason looked at his crew. They all knew what had to happen next. "All hands, evacuate to the escape pods," he ordered. "I will keep us on course." "Captain, we can still fight," his weapons officer protested. "No, we cannot, but we can still hurt them. Get to the pods." "That is an order." 18 of his crew made it to the escape pods and launched just as the Defiant's hull breached. Jason stayed at the helm, steering the dying ship toward the same destroyer that had crippled it. The Draxon vessel tried to evade, but it was too close and moving too slow. The Defiant hit the destroyer at full speed, and both ships vanished in a ball of fire that lit up the space around New Houston like a second sun. On the surface of the planet, the Draxon ground forces were having their own problems. They had landed expecting minimal resistance, maybe some local police with small arms. Instead, they found an entire population armed and ready to fight. Chris Bennett was a mining engineer, not a soldier. He had spent 20 years working in the deep tunnels beneath New Houston's surface, extracting rare metals and building the infrastructure that kept the colony alive. When the Draxon invasion began, he and his crew were 3 kilometers underground, working on a new shaft. They heard the explosions above, felt the ground shake as orbital strikes hit the surface. Chris knew immediately what was happening. The war had come to his home. "Get the charges," he told his crew. "We are going to bring this whole section down." "Chris, this is months of work," one of his people protested. "If we collapse these tunnels, we will have to start over." "If we do not collapse them, the Draxon will use them to move troops," Chris replied. "I would rather rebuild than see alien soldiers marching through our home. Now move." They worked quickly, placing explosive charges at key support points throughout the tunnel network. Above them, they could hear the sound of fighting as Draxon soldiers pushed into the colony's outer districts. The aliens were expecting to overwhelm the human defenses through superior firepower and numbers. They were not expecting the humans to destroy their own infrastructure. Chris waited until his sensors showed Draxon forces moving into the tunnel entrance. There were at least 200 of them, using the tunnels to bypass the human defensive lines above. He let them get deep into the system, let them think they had found a safe route through the colony. Then he triggered the charges. 3 kilometers of tunnel collapsed in seconds, burying the Draxon soldiers under thousands of tons of rock and metal. Chris and his crew felt the shockwave even from their position, heard the groaning of stressed metal and cracking stone. "That is for my home," Chris said quietly. "Now let us go find another tunnel to drop on them." General Vokath watched from orbit as his ground forces struggled to secure even a single district of the colony. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a killing ground. The humans did not fight like any enemy he had encountered before. They did not form battle lines or hold territory. They attacked, inflicted casualties, and withdrew before his forces could respond. Then they attacked again from a different direction. His ships were faring no better. The hidden weapons platforms continued to fire, and every time his forces destroyed one, 3 more seemed to appear. His fleet had lost 8 ships completely, and another dozen were too damaged to continue fighting. "General, we need to withdraw and regroup," his second-in-command urged. "Our casualties are approaching 30%. This is not sustainable." Our casualties," Vokath wanted to refuse. The idea of retreating from a human colony was unthinkable. His species had never lost a battle, never backed down from an inferior enemy. But as he watched another of his cruisers take critical damage from a barrage of kinetic rounds, he realized the truth. The humans were not trying to win this battle. They were trying to make it too expensive to continue. And they were succeeding. "Signal the fleet," Vokath said, his voice bitter. "All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance. Inform the ground forces to fall back to the landing zones." As his fleet pulled away from New Houston, Vokath stared at the planet below. They had taken less than 5% of the surface, and it had cost him over 4,000 soldiers and 8 warships. At this rate, fully conquering the colony would require his entire fleet and result in losses that would be impossible to justify. For the first time in his military career, General Vokath understood what it meant to fight an enemy that refused to surrender. The humans had warned the Council to declare war carefully. Now he understood why. This was not going to be a quick victory. This was going to be a nightmare. 3 months after the war began, the Galactic Council chambers were no longer filled with confident laughter. Ambassador Silara stood before the assembled council members, her silver feathers dulled from stress, and presented her latest intelligence report. "The Draxan Empire has successfully occupied portions of 2 human colonies," she began, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "New Houston is 40% under Council control. Terra Nova is 60% occupied. However, these victories have come at significant cost. Draxan casualties now exceed 30% of their initial invasion force." Kresh slammed his claws against his seat. "Casualties are irrelevant. We are winning. The humans cannot sustain their resistance much longer. Can they not?" Silara pulled up a series of images showing human colonies that had been captured. Every building was damaged or destroyed. Infrastructure had been deliberately sabotaged. Mining facilities had been collapsed. The humans are employing what they call scorched earth tactics. They leave nothing of value behind. Every resource we hope to gain from these colonies has been destroyed by the humans themselves. Council Prime Velthian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Temporary setbacks. Once we establish full control, we can rebuild." "With what?" Silara asked sharply. "Our resources are being drained faster than projected. And that is before we account for the raids." She brought up new data, and several council members made sounds of alarm. The display showed human ships attacking council supply lines across neutral space. Fast, small vessels that struck without warning and disappeared before response forces could arrive. 2 days ago, a human strike force destroyed one of our main fuel depots in the Kepler sector. An entire battle group is now stranded without supplies, vulnerable and unable to retreat. The humans did this with 6 ships against a fortified facility that was supposed to be impregnable. Lieutenant Amanda Ross had led that mission, piloting a small fighter through a debris field that the Council forces thought was impassable. Her squadron of 6 ships had approached the fuel depot from an angle the defensive systems were not designed to cover. They had launched their full payload of missiles in a single concentrated strike and then raced back through the debris before the station's defenders could respond. Amanda had lost 2 pilots from her squadron. But the mission was a success. The depot and everything in it was now a cloud of frozen gas expanding into space. 50 Council warships were stuck in system, without the fuel to reach the next jump point. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Crawford monitored reports from across human space. She stood in the command center, surrounded by displays showing every active battlefront, every ship movement, every casualty report. The numbers were grim, but they were also exactly what she had predicted. "They still do not understand what they are fighting," she said to President Ryan Kaufman, who had come down to the command center to review the war's progress. "They think this is about territory, about resources, about who controls which colonies. They are fighting a war of conquest. We are fighting a war of attrition." Ryan studied the casualty figures. Human losses were heavy. Over 100,000 soldiers and civilians dead, dozens of ships destroyed, entire districts of their colonies reduced to rubble. But the Council was bleeding too, and unlike humanity, they were not prepared for this kind of grinding, exhausting conflict. "How long can we sustain this?" Ryan asked. "Longer than they can," Lisa replied with certainty. "Every month this war continues. More Council species start questioning whether these colonies are worth the cost." We intercepted communications from the Council chambers. They are arguing among themselves. Some want to negotiate. Others want to commit even more forces. Which side is winning the argument? The hardliners, for now, Velthian and Kresh, are demanding total victory. But their populations are starting to notice the casualty lists. The Draxan Empire has not fought a war this costly in 2 centuries. They are not accustomed to losing thousands of soldiers for a few kilometers of occupied territory. Lisa pulled up a new tactical display. I am recommending we launch Operation Persistence. Simultaneous strikes against 12 Council military installations across their space. Not invasion attempts, pure sabotage and destruction. We hit their shipyards, supply depots, and communication relays. We remind them that if they can strike our colonies, we can strike their infrastructure. Ryan considered the proposal carefully. This will escalate the conflict. Some council members might see it as an opportunity to negotiate. Others will call for even more aggressive action. Yes, Mr. President. But it will also force them to divert resources to defend their own territory. Right now, they can focus all their military power on attacking us. If we make them worry about their homes, they cannot sustain the same level of offensive operations. Ryan nodded slowly. Do it. But make sure our strike teams understand the objective. We destroy military targets only. No civilian casualties if we can avoid them. We are not trying to become the monsters they think we are. Operation Persistence launched 1 week later. Across Council space, human Special Forces teams struck at carefully selected targets. They had spent months studying Council defensive patterns, learning their blind spots, and identifying vulnerabilities. The largest strike hit a Draxan shipyard near their home system. A team of 30 human commandos infiltrated the facility disguised as transport workers, using false identifications that had been crafted over months of intelligence work. Once inside, they planted demolition charges in the shipyard's main reactor cores and structural supports. The charges detonated during the facility's night cycle, when only a skeleton crew was present. The shipyard, which could construct 3 cruisers simultaneously, collapsed into itself and fell toward the planet below, breaking apart as it entered the atmosphere. The Draxan Empire lost years of construction capability in a single night. Similar strikes destroyed fuel depots, damaged communication arrays, and crippled manufacturing centers across Council space. The humans did not try to hold territory or engage in prolonged combat. They struck fast, inflicted maximum damage, and withdrew before reinforcements could arrive. The Council was forced to acknowledge a troubling reality. They had been fighting wars against civilizations that respected certain boundaries, that followed predictable patterns. Humanity did not fight by those rules. Humans treated war as total commitment, where everything was a valid target and nothing was sacred except victory. Back in the Council chambers, Velthian tried to maintain control as the other members argued among themselves. Several species were now openly calling for peace negotiations. They pointed to the mounting costs, the disrupted trade routes, the loss of military infrastructure. The war against humanity was consuming resources at an unsustainable rate. We cannot show weakness now, Velthian insisted. If we negotiate from a position of anything less than total victory, every minor species in the galaxy will think they can challenge the Council. AV-Wen. We will see one ply people. And if we continue this war until we bankrupt ourselves, what does that accomplish? Solara demanded. The humans have demonstrated they will destroy their own colonies rather than surrender them. They have shown they can strike our infrastructure across hundreds of light years. This is not a conventional war. We need to reconsider our approach. Kresh rose to his full height, his scales darkening with anger. You suggest we surrender to primitives? Unacceptable. I am committing the full might of the Draxan Empire to this conflict. We will crush humanity once and for all. As the council members continued to argue, Solara made a decision. That night, using an encrypted channel that she prayed the council security forces would not detect, she contacted Daniel Morrison directly. Ambassador Morrison, I am taking a great risk contacting you, she said when the connection established. I need you to understand, that not all council members support this war. Daniel's image appeared on her screen, his expression neutral. I appreciate the message, Ambassador Solara, but unless the council is willing to negotiate a ceasefire, I am afraid your personal position matters little. That is not why I am contacting you. I have learned that Velthian is planning to escalate the conflict. He is proposing the use of biological weapons against Earth itself. He believes that if he can threaten your homeworld directly, your species will surrender. There was a long pause. Then Daniel smiled. And it was not a pleasant expression. Please thank Velthian for the warning, Daniel said. But you can inform him that we anticipated this possibility. Humanity has extensive experience with biological warfare. We used it against each other for centuries. We know how to defend against it, how to contain it, and if necessary, how to retaliate with it. If the Council chooses that path, they will discover that humans can be far more ruthless than they imagine. Solara felt her feathers flatten against her body in a gesture of distress. You would actually use such weapons, if our home is threatened with extinction? Yes. Without hesitation, we sent you our history. Did you not read about what humans do when we are pushed to the edge of survival? We do not surrender, we do not break. We become something far worse than the enemy ever expected. Then this war cannot end well for anyone, Solara said quietly. No, Daniel agreed. It cannot. That is why we warned the Council to declare war carefully. They chose not to listen. Now, they will live with the consequences, or possibly not live at all, depending on how far they push us. The transmission ended, and Solara sat alone in her chambers, wondering if there was any way to prevent the disaster she saw coming. Outside her window, Council warships prepared for another offensive against human space, and far away on Earth, humans prepared their own responses. The war was only 3 months old, but already it had cost more than anyone had anticipated, and everyone knew it was going to get worse before it got better. 1 year after the Council delivered their ultimatum, the war had become a grinding nightmare that consumed resources and lives at a rate no one had anticipated. The Galactic Council chambers, once filled with confident pronouncements of victory, now echoed with arguments and recriminations. Council Prime Velthian looked older than he had a year ago. His chitin had dulled, and one of his arms had been damaged in an assassination attempt by members of his own species, who blamed him for the disastrous war. Around him, the Council members sat in sullen silence as casualty reports scrolled across their displays. The Draxan Empire had lost over 40% of its military fleet. The Council as a whole had spent more resources on this single conflict than they had on the previous century of peacekeeping operations combined, and still, humanity showed no sign of surrender. Admiral Solara, who had been promoted to interim council leader after Velthian's government collapsed in a peaceful coup, stood to address the assembly. We have received another communication from Earth, she said, her voice weary. President Ryan Kaufman has offered to travel to these chambers personally to negotiate a ceasefire. I strongly recommend we accept this offer. Negotiate, Kresh growled, though his voice lacked its former strength. We should be dictating terms, not negotiating them. With what leverage? Solara asked bluntly. We control portions of 2 human colonies, but holding them costs us more each day than they are worth. Meanwhile, human strike forces continue to raid our supply lines, sabotage our facilities, and drain our resources. Ambassador Kresh, your own people are demanding an end to this conflict. There have been protests on your homeworld calling for your removal from office. Kresh slumped back in his seat, unable to deny the truth. Across the Council, similar scenes had played out. Leaders who had pushed for war now faced angry populations demanding to know why so many soldiers had died for worthless territory. I vote we accept the human offer, said one of the Council members who had remained quiet throughout most of the war. We were wrong about them. We should admit that, and negotiate peace before this gets any worse. The vote was nearly unanimous. Only Velthian and Kresh abstained, and their opinions no longer carried much weight. 3 days later, President Ryan Kaufman's ship docked with the Council station, and for the first time, a human leader stepped into the chambers where this war had begun. Ryan entered the room accompanied by Admiral Lisa Crawford and Dr. Karen Phillips. He wore a simple dark suit with the symbol of Earth on his collar, the same pin that Daniel Morrison had worn when he delivered humanity's warning a year ago. The council members watched in silence as the three humans took their positions at the center of the chamber. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Ryan said, his voice calm and professional. "I know this has been a difficult year for all of us." Silara, now seated in the position that Velthian had once occupied, nodded slowly. "President Kaufman, the Council wishes to formally request a ceasefire. We acknowledge that this war has been costly for both sides, and we believe it is time to seek a peaceful resolution." "I agree," Ryan replied. "But before we discuss terms, I think it is important that we all understand how we reached this point. Dr. Phillips has prepared a comprehensive analysis of the conflict. With your permission, I would like her to present it." Karen stepped forward and activated a holographic display that showed the progression of the war in stark detail. Battles won and lost. Casualties on both sides. Resources expended. Territory gained and abandoned. The data painted a clear picture of a conflict that neither side could truly win. "The Galactic Council initiated this war based on several assumptions," Karen began. "You assumed humanity was primitive and weak. You assumed our small fleet meant we could not defend ourselves. You assumed we would surrender rather than fight. Every one of those assumptions was wrong." She pulled up combat footage from New Houston, showing Draxan forces being ground down by relentless human resistance. Then, images from Terra Nova, where human colonists had destroyed their own infrastructure rather than let it fall into Council hands intact. Finally, footage from the various raids and sabotage missions that had devastated Council military installations across their space. "Humanity never sought to dominate the galaxy," Karen continued. "We only wanted to exist peacefully among the other species. We would have been happy to remain in our small corner of space, trading with those who wished to trade with us, and leaving everyone else alone. You forced this conflict by assuming we were too weak to resist. That was your mistake." Velthian tried to speak, but Silara silenced him with a gesture. "Please continue, Dr. Phillips." "Velthian, please continue. The war has cost both sides heavily. Humanity has lost over 200,000 soldiers and civilians. Dozens of our ships have been destroyed. Large portions of our colonies lie in ruins. But we were prepared to accept these costs because we were fighting for our survival. The Council, however, was fighting for resources and territory that you did not actually need. That fundamental difference in motivation is why this war could never end in a Council victory." Lisa stepped forward to present the peace terms. The Council members expected harsh demands, reparations that would bankrupt their economies, territorial concessions that would humiliate their governments. What they received instead surprised them. "Humanity's terms are simple," Lisa said. "First, we retain full control of all our original colonies, including New Houston, Terra Nova, and Kepler Station. Second, the Council will provide reparations sufficient to cover our military expenses during this conflict. These reparations will be reasonable and based on actual costs, not punitive damages. Third, we establish mutual defense agreements with any Council members who wish to participate. Fourth, we open trade and technology exchanges on equal terms." "That is all?" Silara asked, clearly surprised. "You do not demand territory from us? You do not seek to punish the species that attacked you?" Ryan shook his head. "We are not interested in conquest or revenge. We never were. We just want to live in peace and be treated as equals. If the Council can accept that, then we can move forward together." For a long moment, the chamber was silent. Then Silara stood, her silver feathers rising in a gesture of respect. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally apologize for the actions that led to this war. We underestimated your species and dismissed your warnings. Many lives were lost because of our arrogance. If you are willing to forgive those mistakes and work with us toward a better future, then we accept your terms without reservation." One by one, the Council members stood and voiced their agreement. Even Kresh, after a long pause, grudgingly accepted the peace terms. Only Velthian remained seated, his political career destroyed by the war he had championed. The treaty was signed within hours. Humanity was granted full council membership with equal voting rights. Trade agreements were established, and surprisingly, Solara's people were the first to approach Earth with offers of friendship and technological exchange. Over the following weeks, council forces withdrew from the occupied portions of human colonies. The reconstruction began immediately, with several council species offering assistance and resources to help rebuild what had been destroyed. The transition from war to peace was not smooth, but it was genuine. 5 years after the war ended, Dr. Karen Phillips stood in a medical facility on a council member's homeworld and watched as human-designed medical technology saved the lives of thousands of patients suffering from a plague that their own doctors could not cure. The irony was not lost on her. The species that humanity had fought so hard against now depended on human innovation and generosity. Daniel Morrison, still serving as Earth's ambassador to the Council, reflected on those years during a quiet moment in his office. He thought about the warning he had delivered, the war that could have been avoided, and the peace that had eventually emerged from the bloodshed. "We proved 2 things," he said to a young diplomat who had asked him about the war. "We proved that humanity cannot be conquered by force, and we proved that we choose mercy over vengeance when given the choice." Both lessons were necessary. "Do you think the Council truly learned those lessons?" the young diplomat asked. Daniel looked out the window at the Council station, where ships from a dozen species now came and went in peaceful commerce. Human vessels moved among them freely, no longer viewed with contempt or dismissed as primitive. "They learned," Daniel replied. "It cost many lives and wasted countless resources, but they learned. The galaxy discovered that humans fight like demons when threatened, but we extend our hand in friendship the moment the threat ends. That balance, that ability to be both fierce and merciful, is what makes us human." The young diplomat nodded thoughtfully. "And if someone threatens us again?" Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "Then we remind them of the warning we gave the Council. We tell them to declare war carefully, because once they start a fight with humanity, we will see it through to the end. We may offer mercy when it is over, but we will never surrender while the fight continues." Outside, the galaxy continued its eternal dance of stars and civilizations, and humanity, no longer dismissed as primitives, stood among the ancient species as equals. They had earned that equality through blood and sacrifice, through persistence and innovation, and through the simple refusal to surrender when threatened. The Galactic Council had been silent when humanity sent one warning. They had ignored it, dismissed it, and laughed at it. Then they had learned, painfully and slowly, that when humans warn you to declare war carefully, you should probably listen. Because humanity always keeps its promises, both the terrible ones and the merciful ones. And the galaxy was better for learning that lesson, even if the cost had been higher than anyone wanted to pay.